This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by new Averio herbicide from FMC, the first pre-seed burn down in Western Canada to combine Group 27 and Group 14 modes of action for powerful broad-spectrum control of the toughest broadleaf weeds. Ask your local retailer today to find out more.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a huge shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Today, it is January 16th. It's a big day. We got big trade news, but the biggest of all is the fact that this show and this channel is back on Sirius XM in Canada. It's great to be back. Really appreciate the hard work by Rural Media Group to get it back on Sirius XM in Canada, and it is great to be back. And keep that feedback coming, everybody. Continue to tell us how much you value this show and this channel in terms of how it impacts your ability to keep up to date when it comes to rural and agricultural-based information. My email address, of course, is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call or text the RealAg feedback line as well, everybody. 855-776-6147. Today on the program, we're going to have a product spotlight with Bunge and Corteva. We're also going to hear today a lot about trade, and we're going to talk about the USMCA, but we're also going to talk about the big announcement. Canada and China laying the groundwork for, I guess, somewhat of a trade deal, a trade agreement. Let's put it that way. I don't think it's a comprehensive trade deal, but it does impact some of the ag commodities for sure. Lobster, peas, and canola. And so for a lot of the farmers, we're like, hey, we got to fix this. Come on, Liberal government, step up. It's hard to argue today that Mark Carney, Prime Minister Carney, has really stepped up here for Western Canadian farmers and aquaculture. I have real concerns in terms of what happens next. And China is, obviously, Canada's trying to diversify its trade portfolio, but we're also trying to maintain and keep this Kuzma USMCA agreement. Did today's news jeopardize that? What's the reaction from the White House? We haven't seen it yet because we're recording earlier on Friday. But pins and needles over here. This is a gamble by the Canadian government. And there's a lot of people waving the flag of Canada here today and feeling good about themselves. Hey, Canada stuck up for itself. And this is a real win for the elbows up crowd. Long term, we'll see how all this pans out. This is a very fascinating turn of events. Many people did not think these tariffs were going to get lifted, and they are. So here we go. We got things to talk about, and we'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Introducing a new supergroup in your fields, Averio herbicide from FMC. The first product in Western Canada to combine Group 27 and Group 14 actives, Averio herbicide delivers powerful, broad-spectrum burn-off control of early-season broadleaf weeds, including resistant kochia, cleavers, and volunteer canola. This rising star in burn-off innovation works in all soil zones and can be applied pre-seed or up to 3 days post-seeding. Ask your retailer about new Averio herbicide from FMC.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit CanolaSchool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
If you're applying a low-rate N stabilizer, you might be falling for a losing strategy. Low-rate products promise great results, but may lack the potency of higher active ingredient concentrations, so great isn't always what you get. Don't put yield at risk. Put your trust in proven solutions. Anvol Nitrogen Stabilizer, Super U Premium Fertilizer, and Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. These products offer higher active ingredient concentrations imitator brands can't match. See the difference at defendyourn.ca.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Let's bring in the RealAg Issues Panel. Up first, it's Kelvin Heppner coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, how are we doing?
Doing well here, Shaun. It's a snowy day here as kids are home from school. School is canceled. We've had a few of them already this winter, another one today, but an extra long weekend, I guess, for teachers and the kids. But certainly trying to digest all the news coming out of all over the world, but including in Beijing, as we have some major developments on the Canada-China front today.
Yeah, we're definitely starting there. Sometimes we're like, what are we going to start with? I think today we kind of know. Also joining us is Lyndsey Smith, now usually in Ottawa, but right now coming to us from Saskatoon.
Mm-hmm, very dark Saskatoon, as you can tell. I was here for Crop Production Show and for the Saskatchewan Crops Forum, and then ended up getting a bonus day in Saskatoon because of the ridiculous snow that fell in Ontario. So couldn't travel yesterday, so stayed an extra day and heading out today. So hopefully I get home at some point later today.
Also joining us, it's great to have him back. It's Marvin Slingerland, who is with MNP. How are we doing today, Marvin?
I'm doing pretty good, Shaun, and no travel for me. Home in Lethbridge for a few weeks here and enjoying the windy prairies. I think it's all across Alberta, there's wind, and Saskatchewan as well. So I'm glad we can share what Lethbridge is known for across the prairies for once.
Oh, my goodness. I was thinking yesterday, I was in Calgary all day, and the building we're in had a view at the window. We're at the horse track up in Balzac. And so the track was like blowing. It was like, wind erosion, soil erosion on the racetrack, and the flags are like going like crazy. And all I could think about is like, just imagine like 1895 in a sod house and this kind of weather, and just like how miserable. I'm miserable inside in today's conditions. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like at that kind of time with way less comforts that we enjoy today. Okay, let's get to the news. Kelvin, give us the update here. We as of the time of recording here, we're recording Friday morning. What do we know?
Well, the Prime Minister's office, Mark Carney, met with Chinese President Xi Jinping earlier today, Friday, in China. And the Prime Minister's office reports that as of March 1st, Canada expects China will lower its tariffs on Canadian canola seed from today's rate of around 85%, which includes that 76% anti-dumping tariff that was levied back in August. They're going to drop that down to 15% by March 1st, according to the Prime Minister's office. Also, canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and peas will expected to have their anti-discrimination tariffs or anti-dumping tariffs that China applied to them also lifted by March 1st of this year until the end of this year, is what the PMO is saying. The news release from the Prime Minister's office uses the word expects in several places here, so it's not that this is totally guaranteed. I don't think they would use that word if it was totally for sure going to happen, but certainly that's what the industry is expecting. And I know with China, it's never say never until something actually happens. So that's where we're at. And in exchange, Canada is breaking with the U.S. position and lowering its tariff rate on the first 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles imported in the next year, down from that 100% tariff rate that Canada applied to EVs from China last year, down to 6.1%, the most favored nation rate on that first 49,000. And that number, that quota number, is going to climb annually over the next 5 years if this agreement in principle is put into effect. And so, yeah, certainly we've seen canola futures today up more than $10, $12 a ton in early trade on Friday. And still waiting to see how the White House and U.S. administration responds, as that certainly has a large bearing on the net impact of this, I think what we could call a gamble by the Carney government to definitely benefit canola farmers in Western Canada.
Interesting you use that word gamble. We'll hover around that. Marvin, do you see this as a gamble? Good news? What's your reaction to what we're hearing here today?
I think there's some positive news coming out of it, Shaun. I think it's important for the Canadian government to make some strides in this area, and it's a good sign for agriculture that they are trying to break down some of the existing trade barriers. It's still, in my mind, there's a lot of unknowns yet. So it's short term. It's probably going to have some retaliation from the United States. I guess we'll see what Trump says this morning or today. But I think for producers, it's still important going into spring planting that you have a good risk management plan in place, and don't count on this as the golden win. Just look at all your options and make sure you're protecting yourself against price volatility.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too on incremental selling. Is today, dip your toe a little bit today on the market being up, and a couple days of being up.
Yeah. Targets are hitting today.
Yeah. So, Lyndsey.
Yep.
I'm curious on your reaction. We've talked about gamble. Mm-hmm. We've talked about expect. We've talked about the U.S. potential. I'm interested. Curious what Ambassador Huckster is going to have to say about this, especially because his background is in the vehicle industry, auto industry. I expect he'll come out. I'd be kind of surprised if he didn't come out very hard here.
Yeah, he already did yesterday. Actually, yeah.
Pork not on the list, and pork is in the list. That's a very we had Steve Heckbert from CPC on the show last Friday, and he was very like, nothing's gonna, I would have low expectations here on tariff removal. Well, he was right and he was wrong. He was he was right on pork, wrong on the rest of the commodities. What's your reaction to pork not being on the list, Lyndsey?
Well, so I would share the sort of cautious optimism on the one side, right? And we do have to sort of look at this, each of these pieces in isolation, and then when we put it all together, maybe it doesn't seem quite as rosy. But exactly that was sort of the first thing that I clued into is like, okay, so pork's not on this list, so what happens there? And I will note, in addition to this announcement about the agriculture goods and the EV tariffs, there were also 6 MOUs that were signed, and they cover things like natural resources, public safety, culture, all sorts of other things. So we'll have to get some details on sort of what those MOUs eventually look like.
Most were renewals of previous policies.
That's right. They're not brand new. A lot of that was for
pump and circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. And so at the same time, it is a signing, it is a renewal of, and there are 6 of them there, plus one other roadmap that was renewed as well. So, but the bigger part here, I think, is, we heard from the ambassador yesterday in advance of this meeting, essentially sort of saying like, hey, Canada, what are you doing here? And so, was that just in conversation or was that sort of an official statement? Hard to sort of know. He's certainly one that doesn't mince words. And that, I think, why, when we look in isolation, good news for canola, great news for peas, But to Kelvin's point, there's a lot of cautious language in here, and there's also like timelines in here that are very finite, right? So the removal of the pea tariffs and on some of the seafood, et cetera, are beginning in March and only till the end of the year at this point. So that's not a long-term sort of restructuring of this relationship. It feels a lot more transactional for sure. And of course, now, hey, the U.S. is busy, maybe they won't care. But the U.S. is our biggest canola market. I think they're going to care. And so breaking from the U.S. line on EV tariffs it's a risk. It's not just a gamble, it's a risk. The flip side to that, though, is that the U.S. has also told Canada that the U.S. doesn't really want Canada to have an automotive industry and doesn't care if we have an automotive industry. They want it in the U.S.
Yeah, at the same time, though, Premier Ford is like, he's pushing back hard today because he's like, absolutely. This is a huge threat to the Canadian auto industry. So I guess, we've talked so much about, Carney chose autos over canola and all this kind of stuff. I've heard this from tons of you in the audience. Carney clearly chose canola here. Yep. Clearly chose canola. Mm-hmm. And I said to a few people, I didn't know canola was so elbows up. It's this is a real departure from the direction that'll, some of the arguments I've had here on the show the past few months, they're really on thin ice here today because Carney's making a choice that I did not think he would actually make because of the economic argument. Mm-hmm. And I'll read you some of the texts that I have got from people in DC today. There's two of them. I've picked two of them of the few. Canada just signed up for economic suicide mission. That's one. Two, yeah, it's a bold move. I also hope he's got it right, but not sure why he felt the urgency to do it right now. So a questioning of the timing here as the calendar has flipped. So I guess, Kelvin, we're also, yesterday we saw there was news out of Reuters. Lyndsey alluded to the largest canola market is the U.S., that there is a final submission going to go to the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, related to RVOs and those RIN values. And there's a lot of mixed messages here, so we really don't. But Jarrett Renshaw from Reuters reported that RIN reduction we've been talking about is potentially off the table because of the affordability argument on fuel that the refiners have been pushing towards the White House. That would also be good for Canadian canola, not to be discounted from a RIN perspective.
Yeah.
So maybe Carney and the Canadian government is playing the timing right here, where the Trump administration's focus has shifted to affordability instead of protectionism, realizing that often protectionism decreases affordability. And right now, with those midterms looming, the U.S. administration is certainly the last couple of weeks here, whether we're talking healthcare, whether we're talking the biofuel concerns about escalating fuel costs by having that RIN reduction on imported fuels or feedstocks. There's a focus on keeping affordability in the U.S. right now, and so maybe this is the moment where Carney again has gambled and hedged that Canada can make concessions with China right now, and that it won't raise the ire of the U.S. administration. Part of this whole China trip, though, that I also don't understand is the sheer again the pomp and circumstance around it all, making it very visual. Social media clips of Carney getting on the plane, Carney getting off the plane,
very Trump-like,
walking down the red carpet aisle, inspecting the Chinese military as they're standing in formation there. Like all those types of scenes, very Trump-like, and you wonder whether the audience isn't only the Canadian voters, but also the White House in terms of showing Carney again as a man of substance. I believe that was Trump's description of or something along those lines of Carney months ago.
That is my in trying to figure all this out. That is one of the pieces of positivity here, long term in the relationship with the U.S. that provides a bit of a positive spin. That the audience here actually is the like you said, the Carney man of substance, and trying to show the White House, look, we can do this too, and having a calculated bet that is a positive, not viewed as a negative. But at the same time, I'm hearing a lot from the audience. I kind of feel like there's a bit of an island here of the people that are really concerned. And I've talked to numerous people today that are very concerned on the calculation the Canadian government has made here. But I would say the majority of people I've chatted with here this morning, texting and talking to on the phone, are very much like, yeah, whatever, America. See, we don't need you. Again, though, like I've said in my presentation, that's nuts. That's the number. We're talking about $30 billion in exports to China versus like, what, 500-600 to the United States?
Oh, I thought, isn't our trade with the U.S. like 1.3 trillion a year? Maybe not just
in total.
In total, yeah.
So anyway, it's going to be. We'll probably get to more of this. We got to take a break. When we come back, we got a product spotlight, and then we'll get back to the panel right after this quick break.
Summer cypress, fireweed, burning bush, railroad weed, red belvedere. With more aliases than Jason Bourne and a reputation for developing resistance, kochia's one of the most invasive and destructive weeds in the world. Thankfully, there's Corex 2, a pre-seed herbicide from Corteva. Save your cereals with 2 powerful modes of action and the ability to add glyphosate to control kochia and other difficult broadleaf weed. Ask for Corex 2 at your local retailer.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for a product spotlight, and we have two guests here today. Looking forward to this conversation as we get a little bit closer to 2026 seeding time. First up, joining us is Darcy Rafoss. He is Strategic Channel Manager in the Value-Added Ingredients area of Corteva. He also looks after the Nexera program, which we'll be talking about here today. Hey, Darcy, how we doing?
Awesome. Thanks. Good to have you.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. Also joining us out of Altona, Manitoba, it is Nolan Friesen. He's a commercial manager with Bunge. Nolan, great to have you on the program here today.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, okay. So, Darcy, we're going to start with you. And I guess really 100,000 foot. I think a lot of people have heard about Nexera canola, but let's start right there. What is Nexera canola?
So Nexera canola, really, it's an output trait. It's available on certain Brevant hybrids within our portfolio, produces a unique, high-stability oil for a premium market. And that oil is really, it's in high demand from food service, packaged food companies, and to ensure that it's that specific oil quality, Nexera canola is grown under an identity preserved contract, separating it from commodity canola. It creates a distinct, high-value product for the end user.
Yeah, and I guess from a grower's perspective, for the farmer, what is Brevant Nexera canola's benefit to the grower?
Really, I see a benefit in three key areas. First, profit advantage. Brevant Nexera canola hybrids, they deliver about $58 per acre more profit on average than leading canola hybrids. And that profit advantage really comes from a combination of three things: the yield you get from the canola, the premium you get when you have an Nexera contract, and third, the benefits you get from the contract trucking allowance. The second piece would be the performance upgrade. Higher yield potential, improved pod chatter, agronomics for early maturity, trait choice. We have both Liberty Link and Optimum Gly available. The next era of Nexera canola is really here and it's built for profitability. And that third piece would be market access. So growers unlock access to North America's high stability canola oil market with Brevant Nexera hybrids. It's an opportunity that opens the door for a more reliable market for your canola. So really, to summarize it, the three benefits would be profitability, product performance, and that market opportunity.
I just want to circle back. Do you say $58 profitability advantage, not revenue advantage, profitability advantage?
Exactly. So based on the yields that we see within the crop, factoring in all the different benefits from the contracts, and we looked at across a number of different yield trials on head-to-head comparisons, and that number that we came back with on average is $58 per acre advantage. So it's a definite profitability advantage for the grower.
Oh, that sounds pretty enticing. Now I want to get to the but. Okay. IP, closed loop, profitability advantage. This all sounds awesome. But what changes would I have to make in my production system in order to meet the qualifications of the contract?
It's not a lot different. It's very similar to growing commodity canola. They're high performance genetics. They got improved pod shatter. They got your herbicide choice. So if you want Liberty Link or Optimum Gly, you manage the field just like any other lead hybrid. The key difference is not in the field agronomy and how you grow it, but it's in how you handle the seed and the harvested grain. Because it's grown as an IP product, it's really key to maintain that unique high stability oil profile. That really requires a focused approach, maintaining its purity. So that's field selection and harvest storage. But other than that, you're just growing canola. So you manage your fungicides the same, your herbicide choice is the same, and you have that herbicide choice available, whether it's Optimum Gly or Liberty Link, to manage those volunteers or other weed pressures.
That sounds okay. That sounds good. Okay, let's get over right now to Nolan. Of course, Nolan Friesen, commercial manager with Bunge. Nolan, I guess from your perspective at the grain company and the handler here, how are the opportunities different from high stability canola in comparison to more traditional commodity canola?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Darcy hit on a little bit already. First is market access. So our producers, they commit to the market access when they sign up the production contract. So they're doing that well ahead of seeding, right? They're doing it now or they're doing it earlier in the crop year, but it's committed ahead of seeding. With that, Bunge is crushing this high stability canola in Western Canada. So again, market access right there. They get to deliver it to the crush plant in Western Canada, and the oil then is served into North America to our key oil customers that use it. Another benefit that we have is really delivery periods and the timely movement opportunities. Again, the grower is committing to the delivery period now, so they can make that decision around what needs they have on their farm. Because again, every farm is different and unique in that way. We do monitor our delivery period, so we're not overbooking, and we're able to do that because we have a steady flow of oil out of our crush plants to those customers in North America, which again, in return, means that we need a certain amount of seed delivered to the crush plant so we can crush it timely and maintain that cycle working well for all parties. And ultimately, it goes down to working directly with the producer to ensure they're getting the best experience possible working with Bunge. And again, I believe Darcy mentioned this as well. Obviously, financial benefit always comes up. Darcy talked about $58 an acre based on the data that's available. Again, you're committing to this at what's a production contract, so you get the premium over canola. There's also regional differences across Western Canada when you're working with a company like Bunge. So again, I would encourage you to talk to your local Bunge representative if you have questions about premiums, delivery opportunities, or even on-farm pickup and how that could work in your region, because there is, again, differences with the regions.
And one of the questions I have is, what does current demand for high stability canola look like, and what does that demand look like into the future?
Yeah, for sure. Well, the high stability canola oil, it's an established market, right? It's been around for a long time now. We have a very solid key oil users that use the oil. And then from there is obviously growth potential. Again, we have to align that with the grower's demand to grow it, and make sure that's a stable growth pattern that we have. But we are coming off we are going into a growth period right now, it feels like. So again, there is chances for new growers to get into the program right now. And our oil customers really do like some of the functional benefits, such as the fryer life. So again, they're always looking for opportunities there. Okay,
Darcy, I think we're convinced. So if I'm interested in talking about a contract, how do I do that?
Hey, if you're looking at, if you got interest in the program and you want more information, contracts are available obviously through Bunge, as Nola indicated. Contact one of your local Bunge locations, or Louis Dreyfus Commodities out of Yorkton, or also the local Richardson locations. We have limited acres still available, but contacting one of those three, opportunities are available for growers right now.
Well, guys, really appreciate it. Nolan's like, just call Bunge. I think that's what Nolan was thinking right there. Hey, guys, thanks so much for joining me here today. All the best to you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Shaun.
Great stuff. Okay, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Roll Radio 147, right after this.
Time to get excited about your fields again thanks to Excite Bio Yield Plus. It's a phosphate-solubilizing ag biological that works on oilseeds, cereals, and legumes. For 15 years, we've been helping farmers achieve healthier plants and higher yields with our premium liquid inoculants. For more information on Excite Bio Yield Plus or one of our other premium products, call 1-855-948-3246 or visit excitebio.ca. That's XITEBIO.ca. At Excite Bio, inoculants and ag biologicals, it's all we do.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com.
And we're back here on RealAg Radio, Real Radio 147. It's great to be back in Canada, by the way. That's right. It is January 16th, and we are back on the air in Canada on Sirius XM. And everybody, continue to send me emails, on how much you value this channel, Rural Radio 147 on Sirius, as well as being able to hear RealAg Radio as well on Rural Radio 147. S. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Okay, Lyndsey, what did you learn this week in Saskatoon?
Well, that apparently it can be 0 degrees in Saskatoon in January, which is amazing. But yeah, I managed to, for those who listened to yesterday's show, I did moderate the panel at the Saskatchewan Crops Forum, had Pulse Canada, Cereus Canada, canola growers, and grain growers of Canada all up on stage, and had a fantastic discussion there. And with of course, all the farmers there. This is the Saskatchewan Crops Forum also has, most of the provincial AGMs for the producer groups, held in conjunction. So some really great conversations there. There were things that certainly were high on the radar, and this whole tariff discussion was a huge part of that, of course. But there were still other big questions, and that was sort of one of the points of the panel was to, obviously trade is a huge issue, but there are still other things like logistics, containerized traffic, labor disruptions, still high on the list of concerns. I think what's perhaps interesting is some of the things I didn't hear as much about. And maybe it's just people were busy and not, deep into the news cycle yet. We didn't hear a lot of talk about impending changes potentially to AAFC and budget cuts there. And we didn't hear a lot about GATE, which last year was a huge part of the conversation. And that didn't seem to come up nearly as much as well. So, overall the mood though was pretty good, especially given, this was pre-Carney meeting. And I will just say it was fantastic to be in Saskatoon and be able to see so many of my Saskatchewan friends. So that was great.
So was there a lot of talk in the hallways about consolidation of farm groups potentially being more of a topic going forward?
So that was the other interesting thing. It did come up, but not as a main focus. And perhaps, that's just the vibe this week. But it was mentioned, but it wasn't a main focus. So we'll see how that sort of plays out in the next few weeks.
Marvin, as you talk to clients across the country, is our struggles in commodity prices and high input prices, is that continually from the cropping sector? Is that the majority of where the concern is here in 26?
Yeah, 100%. I would say the biggest concern for producers right now is the cost of inputs. So that would be what we're hearing across the prairies, and I would say that's going to be the theme going into this spring season as well, is watching your input costs and margin, and it will more than ever. I think this is going to be the year that you really have to pay attention to what you're growing and what you're selling for as well.
So earlier this week, I was in Kennewick, Washington, and at a direct seeding associate, the PNW Direct Seeding Association. So these are mainly wheat farmers from Washington, Oregon, and Idaho for the most part. And farmer came up to me afterwards and he said, I wonder if we're de-risking this industry too much. What if, should we think about, and from a U.S. perspective, not do ad hoc programming, okay? Throw that out, okay? But also where there is parallel, subsidization of crop insurance, grants for adoption of practices, things like that. Do we need business subsidization of risk management programs? Would the industry be better off if we removed all of those out and had more of a sink or swim sort of mentality when it comes to agriculture? Kelvin, what's your reaction? It's a good question, and I've been asking people on Twitter. I've got a whole bunch of responses across the scope, but what's your thoughts?
In a perfect world, yes. In a economics textbook world, yes. But we don't live in that world, and as long as we have neighbors or competing countries that are subsidizing, it's real difficult to do without really disadvantaging your own industry, your own producers, and ultimately your own political voters, as these are political decisions at the end of the day. And so politicians in countries around the world have made it a priority to keep farms afloat, even when they wouldn't be afloat otherwise. And so we continue to see that. And I know that you go back to the 90s, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, not cool these days, but that was one of the ideas, was to lower protectionism, lower domestic support for producers, and everybody agreed to do that at the same time. And that was the idea, was to move towards this world of not having as much government support to keep producers afloat and individual farms afloat. And so, yeah, I think that in a again economics utopia, yes, we don't need government supply demand, free market concepts should apply in farming and would allow for more innovation and more adoption of things, and there'd be more clear signals and incentives. But we don't live in that world. So if everybody can agree to move in that direction, sure. But not seeing a lot of signs that we're working in more cooperative approach in today's world versus in the past.
Well, we'll tee up Marvin here in a second, but I want to Chris says something like 80% of farmers don't have a budget. If you can get by without knowing your break evens, is the industry really that bad? Gunther says when New Zealand dropped all their subsidies and quotas, the farm bankruptcy rates didn't increase. I do believe the industry would be healthier. Dwight says, hey, completely agree with him, Shaun. Most of the above-mentioned programs end up increasing land prices. There actually might be more farms, not less at the end of the day, just smaller. Trey says, and these are, just so you know, these are Canadian and American responses. Trey says, I have said for some time the government should go all in or get out. The issues now in the South exist because the updates within the OBB to the safety nets were needed 5-ish years ago. We rely on government, yet they're unreliable to fulfill their end of the bargain on time and as needed. Okay, so there's some audience feedback. Marvin, what do you think?
I'd agree with Kelvin. Like in a perfect world, it would make sense. But it'd be so important that globally every major country has to do this at the same time. Otherwise, we're going to have a spread between producers. And I think it goes back to just not the mentality of farmers, but basically the mindset of producers. This is your farm, your business, and running it like a business and not relying on whether it's crop insurance or other risk management programs or other supports from the government. It is really taking that business mindset and knowing your numbers, knowing your risks, and going for it. And I think it would create more competition throughout the industry, and we'd probably have healthier farmers in the long run. But that transition period would be super critical. Because we have to consider some farms may be over leveraged right now with knowing what the backstop is on whether it's crop insurance or other products as well. So it'd be a hard transition, but everybody has to do it at the same time globally.
I'm super interested. Tomorrow, I'm going to be in Lincoln, Nebraska, speaking to a small group of young farmers in Nebraska with Central Valley Co-op. And this is some of we're talking about farm financial literacy, and I'm going to pose this question to them and get that reaction from the young farmer in Nebraska on this. Lyndsey, one common thread I've picked up that is related to this, and this is a Canada and U.S., I think we're the lock and step based on feedback as I've been talking to audiences. There is a belief when it comes to programming, whether it's adoption grants or business risk management and what those look like in either country. Smaller farms believe all the programming is set up for large farms, and large farms believe all the programming is set up for small farms. It doesn't seem like anybody's really happy, and I this feels like a consistent piece of feedback I continue to get from people. I just find it kind of funny.
So, and this, I think, gets to part of this whole conversation is, we tend to, once these programs are in place, they evolve very slowly. They're usually not necessarily designed terribly well at the beginning because they're trying to balance all these different what ifs and components and et cetera. And then we get a program rollout, and then to change it becomes incredibly cumbersome. And exactly that. It's sort of, you end up with, this something that's designed by committee, and it kind of doesn't serve necessarily everyone. And at times it's going to benefit some and not the other. But I would argue part of it comes down to actually understanding some of these programs. And Marvin probably has a lot to say on that point, is that, there are certain programs that really we have very basic understanding. People don't do their homework to figure out or talk to a professional to have them walk it through and realize what we can do with it, et cetera. I would just to back up one step though on all of these things. I mean, yes, there's an economic lens here, and yes, there was, this idea of reducing subsidies and giving subsidies different, is it okay? Is it compliant? Is it not? There is also, of course, the food security aspect to all of this, that as individual countries, and there's a reason we have this within each country, is that every country values their agriculture system in a different way. And for those countries that are hyper focused on maintaining it, they're going to do what they want, and potentially because that's what the citizens want as well. And so, like, there is a human component that I think gets overlooked, is that it's not just about, what would it look like to not have any of these programs. Is that end result what actually your voter base, your citizens actually want? And that's a big question, because it would significantly change in every country. It would change the makeup of what your agriculture system actually looks like.
I got a friend that owns a restaurant, and his attitude is, I don't know, we're going to have like 40% of restaurants in Canada fail this year or over the next 2 years. We don't care about that, right? Like his attitude was very like, and I know there are differences, but I'm just telling you, outsider perception.
Yep.
Very much more sink or swim. They're in the food industry. Mm-hmm. It's not a high-end restaurant. It's a very family-oriented restaurant in Lethbridge. That's his, he's kind of questioning it. So it's because tax dollars are what fund this stuff.
You don't have to look very hard in both Canada and the U.S., Shaun, though, to see businesses in many other industries that are set up completely based off of government policy and government programming, though. So it's not that agriculture is completely unique that way. It's that.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, no.
So it's just that, somewhere society has decided that we like having farms across the countryside, and the idea, and this is where the nostalgia and romanticism of agriculture and farming, we use that in agriculture to justify these programs, and politicians use it to justify these programs.
Yeah.
And Mark Carney will probably have used it in justifying why he needed to get the canola tariff dropped in China today, that kind of thing. So it is, it's a tricky, it's a huge question and curious. It's something that politicians, policymakers have to navigate here in the coming years.
Yeah, the message that Carney set here today is, I care about Western Canadian canola and pulse growers. Like, if I don't want to hear over the next couple of weeks about how this government doesn't care about agriculture, because they have really stepped out big time. That is a contrary interest to other industries in Canada. They have stepped out here in big time support. So that should be your takeaway. For sure.
And depending on U.S. reaction, it could be even contrary to other agriculture sectors. It could affect other agriculture sectors negatively, potentially, again, depending on reaction.
Let's take a break. We've got more RealAg Radio coming up. We've got Marvin, Slingerland, Kelvin, Heppner, Lyndsey Smith back right after this.
Whether you're running a farm operation, in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, operating a company in agri-food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag and food together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Calgary on March 8th, 9th, and 10th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
As you look ahead to the next growing season, there's a lot to consider when it comes to your crop. You need every possible advantage available to you. The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to make the best choice for you and your farm. On-demand videos with leading industry experts, available anywhere, anytime. Go into the season confident and ready with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com.
And we are back here on RealAg Radio. We got Marvin Slingerland from MNP. Find out more by going to mnp.ca. As well, Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner of Real Agriculture. Now, Kelvin, you weren't on the show last week. You were out and about St. Jean Farm Days. Is that correct? And one of the things we posted on RealAgriculture.com, I want to get your comment on it. There's a lot of talk about, we were talking about farm profitability earlier. Great discussion about profitability in Manitoba. We played it earlier this week on the show. Break-evens they're tough this year.
Break-evens are tough. And when you look at overall farm costs, Marvin alluded to this earlier, how this is really the big story right now and has been for the last number of months, probably should have been earlier too. And now as farmers are doing the math for 2026, it's a tough picture. And Darren Bond, like you said, you played the interview. He talked about how farm level inflation costs for farming in Canada, and especially here, or focusing on Manitoba numbers, have more than doubled the overall inflation rate that everyday Canadians have experienced. And so where CPI, Stats Canada, Bank of Canada talks about a 20% inflation over the last 5 years, we're looking at 48, 50, 52% increases in the cost of producing crops like wheat, canola, corn in the Manitoba numbers. And it's, again, very similar across the rest of North America as well. So when you look at 2026, Manitoba Ag does this annual cost of production calculation that is actually, I don't see much else like this across North America. There's some of this data that comes out of Illinois and Iowa, and we saw some of it this week. Not much in Canada, though, in terms of putting numbers to cost of production publicly. And again, it's every farm is different. There's huge variability in terms of how you pay for different things, whether you fix your own equipment or whether you trade in and buy new all the time, those types of things. So there's tons of variability. But when they look at a typical farm, when they do their case study sample farm case, soybeans are the only crop with a positive profit per acre this year, $2.11 net profit per acre. Corn is minus $15.50 an acre, and you get canola minus $29 an acre, peas down at $174 an acre loss. So it's, like you said, not a pretty picture looking at 2026 with, again, not one-size-fits-all calculations here, but kind of this prototypical farm that kind of a benchmark farm that Manitoba Agriculture establishes every winter at this time. So kind of a good comparison to other years, not looking good.
Well, congratulations, though. None of you were cotton. It's not $3.80 a loss per acre.
We don't grow cotton here.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
I know.
Well, and we got to convert the dollars, so it might even be worse. Yeah.
Okay.
It can always be worse. Yes.
Now, Marvin, exactly. And I've been really trying to get as much feedback from growers on this topic, because this is like the number one, as we were talking about earlier. I see a lot of growers jump immediately to, I gotta work on my variable costs, like my seed and my fertilizer, and I'm gonna cut back on this and cut back on that. But I know from discussions that we've had a lot in the past, and we had Stuart, person from MMP, on the show last week, that's actually not where the big differences are. It's in the management of what do we call it? The power plant equipment. That's the difference when it comes to some of those, the variability in some of those break-evens.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like we see input costs, regardless if you're a large farm or a small farm, medium-sized farm. Often they're pretty much the same across the spread. But the biggest variable is in that the cost of running the farm, and you can kill yourself to death with the John Deere disease and over equipment, and it just destroys any profit that you have. But to me, I always say it goes back to planning, Shaun, and you have to spend the time right now. This is the time of the year to sit down with somebody or with your advisor and go through your projection for next year and make sure you're driving the profit out of your land, and don't cheap out on the ingredients that you need to do that, and manage your overhead costs. And
so what are some of those costs that we're talking about there? Just so we get, like, let's put some context on it.
It is labor on those overhead costs. Where we see it's labor, repairs, and basically all your equipment costs. And if you're not right sized for your farm on equipment, you can destroy your profit just by having too much iron around.
Yeah, I know I was talking to Dr. Terry Griffin from Kansas State.
Yeah.
He and I did an event together last year, and he talked about how Kansas State did some research where you don't even need to look at what the farm's doing. You basically just look at machinery costs and repairs and maintenance, and that'll tell you a lot about how that farm is managed.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Lyndsey, another big piece of news before we wrap up here. We only got about 3-4 minutes for it. Maybe we'll talk about more on the bonus. Traceability. Ooh, baby. Things are heated. That is spicy. Like the whole China thing is interesting, and like we can go in a whole bunch of narratives there. But let me tell you, the traceability argument and CFIA putting out a press release on a Saturday, that's telling right there. Like, we're working on Saturdays now? What's going on?
Usually not. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit, because the reason it seems to be so incredibly spicy, and I think that's too kind of a word. It is, and it's probably a word I can't say on air of what it really is. But part of what is driving it very much is misinformation, and I am not. So let's back up a second. There was a call out there that was saying, wrongly, that new traceability regulations for livestock came into force January 1, 2026. That is false. That is not true. There are, however, what is true, there are proposed regulatory amendments to livestock traceability that were gazetted, that were consulted on in 2023, that may be put into Gazette 2, which is the next step of them actually becoming the regulations for Canada, sometime this year. That is true. We don't have a firm date on when that would have even been, because that's how Canada works. We don't always get advance notice of exact days. Okay. So what happened, though, is that somehow it got out there that all these new rules were happening January 1. And there are some very significant people perpetuating this rumor and misinformation that there was no consultation. That's also not true. There was a 90-day consultation as per the rules back in 2023. There were, I'm sure, many people who weren't aware of it. Not being aware of something doesn't mean it didn't happen. Okay. So the second part to this, and I can 100% understand where a producer may not like what the regulations say and may want to consult on them further. That's totally valid and that is completely okay. But the conversation, the pushback, the in-person meetings that have been happening in Alberta and other areas on this have been ugly and full of misinformation and very significant people perpetuating that. And it's really unfortunate. Now, what we did see, you mentioned the CFIA putting out a Saturday press release. They did say they are essentially pausing the process, and we did get a statement from them this week that process of the next step of putting it in Gazette 2 has essentially been paused, and they will update us on when that will happen, and it sounds like there may be additional consultation. But we saw, and I've never seen, I'm actually quite proud of the cattle industry. They did a phenomenal job of collectively, from producer groups to national organizations to even CCA, et cetera, putting out a united voice of saying, like, this is misinformation that's out there. Let's get the real information out there. However, they had to close comments on most of those social media posts because people were vile.
Yeah, it's ugly. Like I have I have legitimate questions. Like,
absolutely,
is the incremental?
Yes.
Is the incremental increase in traceability worth it? What's the opportunity cost for not doing this? Like, I think there's
totally.
Those are legitimate questions.
And that's where blame lies with CFIA, I think, in terms of communications. Sure, you followed the regulatory process. The rules were followed in terms of consulting and that type of thing. But you got to realize that this requires a major communications effort. And that's where, to me, that's like...
But the regulator doesn't do the comms. So this is where. So this is
sort of that's their.
You should though. If like then the politicians need to. Then the politicians then the government needs to somewhere.
Yeah,
it's not.
So
it's not the producer groups that are advocating necessarily for.
It's actually the responsible administrator that really. The responsible administrator and then the organizations. Actually, there is in our process of livestock traceability the communication of changes and the rules are actually tasked to certain organizations.
Yeah.
So yes,
somebody's got to do the sales. Somebody's got to do the sales pitch on the return on investment of this increased red tape.
But those are two
this is what happened with value creation in the seed industry. This is the exact same thing where the government doesn't communicate. They don't communicate because we're just the regulator, and then it goes frickin' totally sideways. But we're out of time.
Yes.
We are gonna do a quick bonus segment. We may continue this discussion. Hey Marvin, thanks for joining us here today. Appreciate it. Hey, Lyndsey and Kelvin.
Bye, everybody.
Okay. Good to have it's great to be back here. Okay, if you have any questions, comments, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And of course, go Bears on Sunday. Rams, enjoy that cold weather, boys. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected on RealAg Radio. We'll chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by new Averio herbicide from FMC. Active on tough and resistant weeds, including Group 2, 4, and 9 resistant kochia, Group 2 and 4 resistant cleavers, volunteer canola, and more. Averio herbicide delivers powerful, broad-spectrum burn-down control. See your local retailer today.
Commercial breaks are interesting around these parts.
That's when I get to swear.
That's when you swear? That's when you go...
Yeah, I get all my vulgarities out in the commercial breaks.
Kelvin, what did we not cover here today? We didn't talk about the USDA report. We kind of covered that in some of the profitability stuff, but that was just ugly. I don't know if I want to go back there. That was just nasty and ugly and negative.
Man, I'm not sure. There's a lot of news that happened, and I'm trying to think what.
Tied to what we discussed earlier about probably gives Carney, for I think a lot of people why they're supporting Carney's decision here on this China trade deal is the fact that earlier this week President Trump said that had some really nasty stuff to say about the USMCA.
Yeah, as he toured the Ford plant in Michigan, and talked about how USMCA isn't really necessary, and again, I think. I push back on that a little bit because he does need congressional approval to withdraw from USMCA or CUSMA. And so to me, the most likely scenario is that it remains a baseline for the Canada-US-Mexico relationship with tariffs on top and arbitrary ad hoc actions that the White House implements on top of that cause all kinds of chaos. But I'm not sure he can withdraw that easily, as simple as what some of the headlines implied coming out of that again. And then we also saw Ford this week work on a closer deal with BYD, the big Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer, on using them as a battery supplier a day or two later. And so the reality sets in once again after Trump leaves and heads back to the White House from Mar-a-Lago or wherever he headed from Michigan.
Marvin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think some of the contradictions you hear, like whether it's from Ford CEO and Trump, I think business is just sick and tired of the volatility, and everybody just wants to go back to where we were 2 years ago. Because whether it's agriculture or auto industry, there's so many unknowns, so many moving parts, and any business just wants to keep going in the direction they were going. And I think, there's just so much noise, and I think you can just sense the frustration on every side, and people just want to go back to normalcy.
Well, I'll give you an out of agriculture example. I had dinner last night with a friend of mine from Calgary who works in kind of the industrial space. Some of his niche products that he offers customers, he only has like a couple different suppliers in North America, and there's only one really good one in Canada. And because there is a tariff, because it is steel based, because there's a tariff on the U.S. product, it's limited to him to one supplier. And the Canadian supplier knows that and has been like grinding, and his cost of goods continues to go up, and he's being cornered. And so his frustration is, we need to get to the other side of this because I need options, because I want to be able to buy the U.S. product, because my Go Canada Canadian supplier is treating me like I'm being pushed out of business at a margin, right? And so
but tariffs don't cause inflation. Tariffs don't cause inflation, though.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's been one of the challenges. I know, but that's one of the challenges. It has been very slow coming, man. That has been slow coming.
But and this is that. Those are exactly the points of like why when we meddle in markets, like with things like tariffs, etc., the costs go up, and that's why.
When you talk to an equipment dealer, we talked earlier about cost of production and how it's escalated and how farm level inflation has doubled what the rest of the population has experienced. When you look at parts and machinery, it's even higher than double. It's quadruple in some cases. And when you talk to your person at the parts desk or at the equipment dealership, why prices are so high? Tariffs. It's not that they actually maybe are affected by tariffs directly, but there's all kinds of opportunities, like you alluded to with the cost of that steel in that example, Shaun, where you go from having competition to not having competition because of tariffs, keeping things out of the country or that type of thing. And so, whereas a few years ago, COVID was the excuse for why prices were higher on everything, now you just say tariffs and people nod and say, okay, I guess it must be tariffs.
And I continue to wonder about like how much tariff fraud there is out there, right? Where somebody is told, oh yeah, there's a tariff on this. And
that's what I mean. It's a simple answer, even
it's a catch-all,
even with a very complex explanation behind it that may not actually be directly due to tariffs.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Lyndsey, what did we not talk about? You got to go catch a flight. But
I got to catch a flight. Yeah, we covered
your final word. What is it?
Crepes. Somehow we're halfway through January. I feel like to Marvin's point of wanting everything to go back to normal. I am not hopeful of such things. I just want to get through like the next month so that the hope of spring can keep us all going, because it was a rough week, guys. And so I guess maybe final word on like this whole traceability and the ugliness online, etc. Like, I am all for criticism of a government program. I am all for calling out and questioning why we have certain things, whatever, but it's got to be respectful, and you got to start with facts, and you have to be willing to listen. And I really wanted to say we got some really phenomenal feedback from members of our audience who were really appreciative that we're still going to cover these things, even though we know it turns into a dumpster fire online. And so thank you to each of you. You made me want to continue to do this job this week, because sometimes it really sucks to have to communicate online. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, good thoughts. Get out of here. Go.
Yeah. Okay, I got to go. Bye, everybody.
One thing that I noticed this week in Sioux Falls. Are you leaving, Lyndsey?
Yeah,
okay,
I'm going. Bye.
Get out of here. Leave. God. Doesn't listen very well, Kelvin. When I was in Sioux Falls earlier this week speaking at the South Dakota Agribusiness Conference, there's like 500, this was cool, like 500 grain dealers and ag retails and farm equipment dealers. Great group. Huge. They had a trade show. Like it was very impressive in Sioux Falls. One of the things that was really cool, or what they talked about, was access to labor and trying to find salespeople, trying to find someone to drive that sprayer to cover that, all that ground. And they did something really neat, which I think was awesome. Is they had like custom applicator of the year, and so they had three candidates or three finalists. And what I thought was awesome was like Kelvin Heppner works at this co-op. He sprayed this amount of acres last year. I think the guy that won had like 35,000 acres sprayed, but there was somebody else who was like 65,000. And then it showed like the sprayer they drive. It was like NASCAR. It was like, Kelvin Heppner, John Deere 800R, and really want to appreciate all my sponsors there. It was so funny. But Marvin, access to labor is not just a challenge at the farm gate. It's a massive challenge throughout the industry.
Yeah, whether it's agribusiness or primary production, it is hard to find consistent qualified labor, and part of the issue is like a lot of the jobs are seasonal, and what are you going to do in the winter with them? And it's and creating a workplace where people want to work and have a future career. And I think for farms that are of significant size, it's easier to show a career path and a long-term career for even young people. And there's a lot of, I tell young people this all the time, there's a lot of really good paying jobs on farms right now, and places where you can make a really good career and raise your own family too, if you want. So you don't per se have to own a farm to be part of agriculture. And I think it's telling the story of those opportunities in the colleges and the universities, some of the potential.
Yeah.
And there's some significant high paying jobs in agriculture. But.
And diverse. Like I think it's a real challenge. And I don't think, we've got a real gap here in the short term. So you can argue that robotics and autonomy and AI, like all that's going to create some sort of, help assist in closing the gap. But I just don't, that doesn't solve all the problems. It does for certain jobs. It doesn't for all. I just think, Kelvin, this is something that we're aware of it, but maybe we need to start to question, like, our recruitment, the way that we're doing this, is it actually getting the results that we need to have in order for this industry to function at the full capacity it needs to?
Yeah, and it is it's become a huge competitive advantage if you're a farm or an employer who is good at attracting good workers versus a farm that has trouble attracting workers. Because we talked about it earlier, how equipment costs can make or break a farm, and this goes hand in hand with equipment costs. There's farms, I can think of a handful of farms off the top of my head that have invested in a newer, much larger capacity one combine, because they've been having trouble the last number of years finding operators for 2 or 3 combines. So they've switched to one much more expensive combine, and right there, all of a sudden their equipment costs have jumped on their balance sheet. And so this ties in with that, with major consequences there if things get out of whack there. So yeah, it's not a simple thing to solve, and I'm not sure, is this Ag in the Classroom and organizations like that go into classrooms and promote it, and I think that's important, but I think the onus is also on individual employers to also be good representatives in town in terms of when they interact with people that aren't from a farming background and potential employees and that type of thing. Like, this is the onus is not just on industry groups. I think it's on individuals that work in agriculture to do a good job of selling it as a good place to work, like Marvin alluded to.
Yeah, and depending on where you are, like, it's in some ways like if you're in around the GTA, right? It's highly competitive, and so that's a factor, right? You got to be competitive in order to recruit some of those people, and because there's an abundance of them. You're around a city of 4 or 5 million people, whatever it is now. But if you're like in Sioux Falls, the state population is around 1 million. It's a lack of people in general. So it's also it's kind of also competitive because you only have a small base that you're working with. Like, it kind of doesn't matter close to a big city or in a very rural community. The challenge is really, really the same. This is a tough mountain for us, and I know it's not super sexy to talk about. It's like that elephant in the room here for our industry that is like a real systemic issue. But any final thoughts on China, Kelvin?
I think, to me, I have whiplash. I think this morning from how Canada has flip-flopped on this. Just months ago, we were talking about our national sovereignty and security issues and fentanyl coming into the country, and China was this pariah on the world stage that we didn't want to have a close relationship with because they were infiltrating our political networks and that had police stations here in Canada. And here we are with this deal, and I'm not sure, just because the U.S. has become less reliable doesn't mean that China's become more reliable. It just means it's a relative change. And so I sure hope that we still have eyes wide open in terms of potential threats, as China still is seeking influence around the world and using the opportunity that the U.S. has created here by becoming less reliant. China is seeing that as opportunity, and so hopefully Canada is being, the Carney government's careful in terms of what they're all signing up for here.
Yeah, there will be people around the president. Peter Navarro is an example. For example, that comes to mind. The China hawks around the president, if they have access to him, they will be telling him very, very unfriendly things about Canada and who Canada has chosen. Now, one of the realities here is I think President Trump has shown that he is not a real China hawk at all. Okay, there's a talking of the economic rivalry between the U.S. and China, but he personally is not a real China hawk. The question is, how is this perceived? And if it's perceived as Mark Carney, as we said earlier, Mark Carney, man of substance, and look, I'm impressed with that. Good work there, you guys. Like, if the reaction is that, safe. If the reaction is Canada chose a nefarious character and fentanyl and letting all these autos that are going to be, they're going to come into Canada and then they're going to go to the U.S. and we don't want that. It's going to be a real sticky, ugly 2026 here that is going to have to be a new problem for Carney to navigate through. But the other part about in today's reality, I think we think about a trade deal, it's a forever sort of thing. There's a great potential that 3-4 months from now, this whole thing between China and Canada is poof, as Canada try, okay, we'll negotiate a USMCA. We'll do a new deal with you, America. We'll review it. We'll just, we got all the canola shipped. We'll now put the tariffs back on EVs. Like, there's a lot of different ways that this can go, but I think what you said earlier, Kelvin, this is a gamble, is probably the right way to view this, I think. Anyway. Guys, this has been fun. It's been a beaut, as the Griswold on Christmas vacation, they say. It's a beaut, Clark. This is a good show today. Really do appreciate it. And Marvin, I know that is not your real background because those cows aren't leaning sideways from the wind. They are standing straight up. So
this is the dream for Lethbridge, but it's not reality.
But it's like you're looking off your deck in Cowley, except the wind's not blowing 200 kilometers an hour. Marvin, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Really, really appreciate it.
Bet. Thanks, Shaun.
Great stuff. And if you want to find out more about MNP across Canada and some of the services and products they provide, go to mmp.ca. Kelvin, well, I'm sure we'll be talking many times today. All the best to you.
Yep. Take care, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Like I said earlier, keep the feedback coming in terms of things you heard here today. What are your thoughts on this China-Canada trade deal? Is it a good from elbows up? Canada has its own autonomy perspective. Are you concerned about the reaction of the U.S.? Does that even matter? And I want to hear your thoughts. If you agree or disagree or what's driving you here today, you can do that by sending me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Cheers, everybody.